Um, so if we go to the next slide, some of you guys are wondering, I'm here at church. Why are we talking about sound? Okay, and you guys might be starting to play in your head. What is all of the spiritual significance? What are we going to talk about? Is it rushing of the mighty sound? Is it the roar of of the lion, and all that stuff? We'll get to some of the spiritual stuff first, but really, actually, we started talking about this last Sunday, and I'll just kind of give you a little demonstration. You guys hear this? Kind of annoying, huh? All right. It's actually pretty annoying for me. I help out with Mary's ministry a lot as a sound person. So for me, that's like it may kind of bug you guys, but it annoys the heck out of me. So I'm still trying to figure out how to fix this. But as we're talking about this amplifier here, for some reason, is picking up some static. It's picking up some sound that we kind of really don't want to hear it. So we're starting talking about how to fix it. I went on Amazon and I got this little audio converter box and hoping that would fix it. And then for some reason the connection didn't really work out well. So we're like, all right, that doesn't work. And then all of a sudden I remember, oh yeah, I have this power filter, right? And then I was really hoping that today when we come in we won't have that buzz sound, but it's still there. And as we're talking about this, I was explaining to Judy and then also a couple of other people, there's this dirty sound that goes through, electricity is actually really, really cool because actually electricity operates kind of like in waves. And I have to be a little careful here because we actually have an engineer here that knows a lot more than I do, so I have to be careful with some of the stuff that I say. I don't overstep my, my own personal knowledge, but all this electricity kind of going through. And what's very interesting is that when you start having stuff plugged in all together on the same circuit, same power line, right? It starts creating this loop. And this loop starts going back and forth, back and forth. And it picks up, my amplifier picks up that sound. So here I am, start talking about this and start kind of nerding out. And Pastor Ruth Ann said, so Reagan, you want to share next week? And I'm like, oh, okay. And because what I was talking about with sound is that it is so amazing. Electricity, only time you see electricity is like static shock, right? Or like if you ever seen those, like those movies where there's like lightning bolts, Tesla, those stuff kind of shooting out. It's like, okay, I can see electricity. But truly electricity just waves. And it's sound. You guys can all hear me, but can any of you guys actually see the words coming out of my mouth? Can you guys hear the buzz that was coming out of here? No, right? And sometimes we kind of forget the power of sound. All right? How many of you guys ever gone like nature, hiking, camping, whatever? Here we are, we live in Los Angeles, Orange County. We're blessed over here. There's quite a bit of green here, right? Fullerton, is the city of trees, so we actually do see a lot of trees here. But I grew up in San Fernando Valley. Flat. It's a bowl. Heat everywhere. Brown, right? Only thing that we actually take pride in is palm trees. But whenever we go out to nature, like Yosemite, Sequoia, you're standing there, you see all of this stuff, and all of these stimulus hits your brain. You're like, whoa. But sometimes we forget the exact same thing kind of happens with sound as well. And today I want to talk a little bit about the power of sound, okay, and its impact upon us, and some of the spiritual significance of all of that. Okay, so next slide. What is sound? Okay, we see a couple different depictions of sound. Obviously, we know majority of the time we hear sound through our ears. Okay, there's all these really cool symbols that I got. On the bottom, you see the universal symbol for the sound, right? So on every computer, there's that. If you click on it, you know that you could adjust the sound level. Okay, and then sometimes, if you're a little bit geeky, or you're an audiophile, you definitely see the little symbol on the very right-hand side, right? The equalizer, how it goes up and down. And one of the biggest mystery for somebody who looks at a soundboard is like, there's all of these dials, right? How do you know what to turn to make the sound better or worse? Especially when there's no sound coming out. One of the best thing I love to do is when Mary's group, they're a worship leader group. worship leading group, right? They teach you technical skills and they also teach you spiritual skills of how to be a part of a worship team. And one of the things that a worship leader always says is, you gotta know your team, okay? You gotta know your vocalist, which most of you guys do, but a lot of you guys ignore your instrumentalists, right? And then I really love, this one part of the teaching, and then most of you, almost all of you guys, ignore your sound man sitting in the back. And then we kind of talk about this ahead of time, because the sound man actually is the most powerful person in this room. Because if they want, and when she says that, I push a button, okay? The sound man has the power to mute it, and then all of a sudden, your sound is no longer projected, and the rest of the auditorium will not be able to hear it. All right, so these are just a couple of things I want to throw in your brain before we talk about, some more of the power of sound. A couple of warnings, okay? Number one is, if you have sensitive ears, I apologize, okay? And then, like any crazy stuff that you find off the YouTube, I'm just gonna go ahead and put a little disclaimer here, is kids, please don't try this at home, or you are responsible for your own consequences. And I heard, especially I have to say this, especially you, Marie. Okay. All right. So can we go with the next one?
Okay. I turned that down.
Okay. This one I could turn it up a little bit. Okay. Okay. All right. So with this video, he goes through 3 or 4 different renditions of this. And one of the videos, he says after he breaks it, he does the same kind of cheering. He's like, yes, number 96. And don't you think that don't you suspect that this is a trick? Okay. And now obviously you can tell this video is relatively old. Okay, so most people nowadays actually have seen tons of other YouTube video where people actually break the glass, with their own voice. The best one I saw yesterday with my family is this little kid. Okay, he goes ahead and he takes a wine glass. Okay, with a straw just like that, and I'm thinking, kid, what are you doing? And he said, today I am going to demonstrate how to break a glass with my own voice, okay? I mean, like 10-year-old kid or something like that. I mean, at least I'm wearing glasses. This kid is just doing it without the glasses in front of him. And he goes ahead, and it broke. And he's all cheering, he's all dancing. The dad in me is like, child, broken glass, broken glass, broken glass. Where's mom? And all of a sudden, mom came over and said, honey, what happened? Okay. I'm going a little bit off tangent, but voice actually has the sound actually is very, very, very powerful, and we'll get into about how we could break this glass, okay? And we're not gonna break it. Don't worry. This is your glass. I borrowed it. I was gonna bring one myself, but I was afraid I was gonna break it in transit, so I borrowed one for you.
Accidentally.
Okay. So next one, we're gonna geek out a little bit. If this is over your head, just sit there and enjoy. I had a pastor mentor tell me is that don't ever feel bad about falling asleep. Okay, if you're tired, if you're gonna close your eyes, just say, Holy Spirit, still continue to speak to me. All right. So sound through science and math. Okay, sound consists of waves and vibrations. All right, and this is a depiction of what we're talking about. It's measured in amplitude, as we talk about commonly. You hear about decibels. And it's also measured in frequencies, also known as hertz, okay? And then if you look at this, you're like, oh yeah, that's a little bit wave, But if you ever taken calculus, you're like probably getting nightmares now, okay? You're like sine, cosine, okay. Now that little symbolism right over there, oh my gosh, So if you've been there at the math, when I looked at this, I was a little bit traumatized, okay? But honestly, physics and advanced mathematics is trying so hard to understand sound. Sound's interaction with the things around it, okay? Because as we go ahead and continue to talk about this a little bit more in the next slide, there's actually approximately 7 different types of sound waves that exist in nature, okay? And I totally forgot we have another engineer in the back, Cheryl. She's like all nodding over here. So now I'm getting even a little bit more nervous because I'm in healthcare. Okay? Physics, I almost failed the first time I took it. I'm a doctor, not in science though. Okay, and if anything, I know chemistry a little bit more than all of this stuff. But the three predominant types of waves that we actually find in sound. Okay, it's pretty interesting. Sound wave actually is categorized in 3 different ways. One is a longitudinal wave. Motion of the wave is parallel in the direction of the energy that is traveling. Okay, so if energy is traveling this way, waves goes along with it. Okay, energy goes this way, waves does not go this way. Okay, mechanical waves. Sound waves pushes and pulls at a molecule as it moves through its medium, and most commonly the medium is air. And the reason that you're able to hear me is that as I speak, these waves are coming out and it's pushing all the air molecules along with the parallel direction, longitudinal direction going over there, and that you're able to hear me. Okay? And how do you even hear? Have you guys ever stopped and thought about that? I know like most of you guys, oh yes, I remember biology or physiology, I learned that here's my ear, okay, it goes through my ear canal, and then I have these little three pieces here that, some of you guys might remember the name of it. They go ahead, one goes like this, one goes like this, and one goes like this, and somehow these sounds comes in, it hits it, and it translates it for you. It translates it for you. Google. Okay? Now this is like something totally for me mesmerizing because, in the old days, I used to volunteer at the school library. Okay? And this is like in the 1980s. We had a little reproduction machine where you go ahead, you have this little sheet, you put it through this purple thingamajigger, and then it turns in a drum, and then you get these purplish blue Xerox copies. We're not even called Xerox, duplications. Okay? And it's a really ugly, messy process. And then all of a sudden came the Xerox machine. Okay? Now the librarian says you're not allowed to use it, Reagan. But what was really neat, and you gotta remember, this is the 1980s, okay, early 80s. You put a piece of paper over it. You push a button. Harry Potter magic. All of a sudden, the other side is an exact copy of what was on here. Okay? Fast forward 10 years later, you push the exact same button, a color copy comes out. Kind of complicated, isn't it? Now think about that with sound. Think about that with sound. I mean, really, I want you guys to pause and think. Have you guys ever stopped? It's hard enough for us to try to understand another language. But thought about how can something mysteriously in the air just moves around and it hits my ear, and somehow I know exactly the words I'm saying. Now you guys might not understand all the stuff I just said, but at least you heard the words that I spoke, right? All right, next slide. So, who's like this right now? A little bit, right? Okay, I was trying to find one with somebody pulling their hair out, but I didn't find that. Okay, so there is a lot of power in words. In sound. Okay, there's a lot of power in sound. There's so much power in sound that, next slide, that a government agency actually tried to go ahead and create a weapon. Ultrasonic infrasonic cannon, okay, is the bazooka sound. Okay, this prototype sonic cannon has the ability to use sound as a weapon. When they go ahead and use it, it actually has a dual purpose. Number one, the sound could actually break through the wall, physically shattering the wall so it crumbles so that they're able to enter. The other part is that once it actually breaks through that barrier, any of that sonic cannon hits somebody, it immobilizes them. Or I shouldn't say immobilizes them. It goes ahead and kind of quote unquote knocks them out. Okay, and it does that by causing such extreme uncomfortableness for the person that they're in this case the enemy. Okay, it messes with their hearing. They start feeling sick, like they want to throw up. Like, one analogy, they said is like the person that gets hit by this turns green, like literally like you're puking green, okay? And then even though they're trying to run away, they can't keep their balance, so they actually just fall over, okay? Now, obviously, you don't see this at the latest riot, that happened recently. And the reason they can't do this is because actually it's way too lethal. Okay, they cannot control the effect of this cannon to ensure that the person that's getting hit actually won't die. All right, this is all from sound. Okay, you guys might think, okay, what else are they? Okay, they have that like maybe it's doing something. It's like actually no, this is all just purely from concentrated sound. Okay, if you really want to know how this is even possible, Cheryl is in the back. She's an inventor, and she knows about all these intricate stuff. So she can kind of tell you the basic concept of that. Okay, but no, we're not talking about this kind of sound. Okay. Now next, if you guys ever heard this phrase, we don't need to know how to build a car to drive a car. Okay. And this is very, very important. Some of the stuff I'm going to talk about, you're like, I have no idea what you're talking about, Reagan. Some of it is tickling something within you that just makes you go, wow. But at the end of the day, you don't need to know you don't need to know how to build a car in order to drive a car. Now, some of you might have a very, very, very old car that's, still manual shift and everything like that. I don't think there's anybody that doesn't have power steering or power brakes anymore. I grew up in the days where we had cars like that. Pastor Ken and Miss Laverne, you probably remember that. It's like, here you are, you're trying to turn, and you're putting so much energy. Nowadays, you hop into an advanced Tesla, and you just push a button, and it drives you there. Either way, you don't need to know how it works to get from point A to point B. Okay? But we need to remember a couple of things. God is a creator of this natural order. How sound comes out, scientists could try to explain it. Scientists could try to make sense of it. Mathematicians could try to write fancy models based off of it. But at the end of the day, they are still trying to describe something that God has created. And He has created actually very specifically with a very good order. Because if there isn't this order, as I'm speaking right now, some of you guys could be keeling over and dying. And that wouldn't be good, right? Because there isn't that control of the sound of all the wavelengths that we talked about with the frequency, with the amplitude, and it's like Reagan is born with regular voice, Bob over here. Bob is my imaginary illustration friend, okay? So if I say Bob, that's who he is. Like Bob all of a sudden starts talking, and next thing you know, he speaks with, sonic cannon voice. No, God knows these orders, and He does these things. In order to go ahead and preserve something that's wonderful, and we'll see about that, okay? And I want to kind of remind you guys, based off of what I said, there is power in sound, and we're going to talk about some of the creative power in sound, okay? Some of the influences, and also resonance, okay? And then also, I forgot to add over here, synchronicity with sound, okay? Because there's definitely power with that, and how it impacts each and every one of our life. Creative power. You guys all know about creation. In Genesis 1, it talks about day one, God created heaven and earth. And then later on, with the atmospheric sky, with plants, stars, with animals, and then later on the land animals and Adam and Eve, right? All of these things happen in 6 days, because He rested on the seventh day. All right? But now I think most of you guys were at the Rock, right? So you guys all hear Pastor Jerry talk about, the power of the word, power of the tongue. And so it is not unfamiliar for you that God spoke and it happened. Okay, God spoke and it happened. Let there be light. Let there be crawling animals. Okay, let there be this. Let this happen. Let that happen. And He said, let it, because He spoke. He made a sound, and it happened. He didn't think and say, It wasn't mental magic. It wasn't mental power. He purposely, deliberately spoke to make it happen. Okay? And then if you guys all took level 3 of OSL, you guys know the power of the word and the spoken word and all of that. And I'll touch on that a little bit later. Okay, so just a little interesting thing is like theology-wise, God kind of revealed this to me last night. You know, it's nothing new, but it tickled me a little bit. Actually, day 6, when He created man, He didn't speak. He made. He made. He didn't just command you out. He made. And that requires a relationship. He breathed life in you. That requires something intimate. Okay, so I just want to make sure that it doesn't get lost that, oh yeah, you know, He just spoke it and we came into existence. Man has a very, 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 very different authority. And I think that's why we're going to understand sound and the power that we play within all of that. Okay? Next, creative power. Okay? Everything, including sound, has a power to create. And if you don't really believe me, I'm going to show this. Okay? This is where it's going to be a little bit uncomfortable for some people. Okay? I'm going to try to keep the sound down. But as this goes through, I'm just going to preface this a little bit so you guys know. There is a speaker underneath this. Okay, that's what these wires are coming through. This is a metal plate, and those little dots that you see on top of it is sand. Okay, and then sound is going to come through, and this one is actually the long version, so you're not going to see the different hertz, you know, of the sound that is being played. So whenever you hear a note, oh, this is not plugged. You hear a note, doom. You can actually measure that sound to see what is the frequency of that. Doom. That's a much higher frequency. You guys all kind of understand that, right? So as we go through different frequencies, you will see that sound actually has the power to create. Okay, let's go. Mind you, no Harry Potter magic here. Nobody waving a wand.
What?
Nobody shifting things around.
Gets more intricate when it's higher.
It's very true.
You could just say Sam.
Wow. You could just say sand.
1332.
All right. So it just goes on, and like somebody mentioned, it gets more and more intricate. Okay. And what is actually now, of course, the science people will be able to explain more. Is as the frequencies start changing, you'll know that in terms of the waves wise, it gets actually shorter and shorter and more compressed. In the sense that, therefore, it's actually creating even a more complicated, process. Now, science will like to say, well, this is very cut and dry, it's because, exactly what Reagan said, except much, much more complicated. And therefore, that's why for each one, it has this, it creates this shape based off of how the oscillation happens and all of that stuff. Yeah, but who created that shape for that specific wavelength? Why does it act that way? Why is there that specific order? Even though it goes ahead and gets more and more complicated. It has the circles, it has the arc, it has the lines going across. Why doesn't it wiggle like this? Why doesn't it do waves like that? Well, give us 10 more years and better supercomputers and we'll create more modeling to try to answer that. We don't really understand. But somehow, God had his humor. And letting mankind find out that frequency actually creates different really cool shapes. And for me, it's awesome, right? And as you go through these kind of shapes, then it's like you can say, well, 480 megahertz, that's my jam right there. That's my shape. I really like that shape, And the beauty to create merely with sand is pretty darn neat. Okay? Next, we're gonna actually talk about power of sand to influence. Okay? Sound and words has influence over each and every one of us. And like I said earlier, if you took level 3, you totally understand that. Okay? Acoustic wave primarily enters through our ears. Okay? Primarily enters through our ears. Now, obviously, you've been next to that, that guy who blasts his car super, super loud, and the bass is just thump, 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 and the next thing you know, it's like, it is not coming through my ear. It is like bouncing right here in my heart. My whole body feels it shaking and rattling. Do you know that's how it sounds? Dude, your car is gonna fall apart over there because of all of the bass and shaking and rattling. But primarily, it goes through our ears, and these are all the acoustic sound, okay? But what is very interesting is that as sound enters into us, it has an impact. And there's actually a whole entire, a study. It's called psychoacoustic, okay? I know there's something like this. I didn't know there was a fancy name for it. And when I saw it, I go, oh, that's kind of cool. It makes sense. Psycho, like psychology, and acoustic, sound, okay? And this is a very simplified model of it, and if you're thinking about words, it totally makes sense. You hear a sound, your ear picks up that sound, it goes through, and that little ringing that we talked about, and I was very bad in physiology, so I forgot the name of that. All of that stuff. There's a sternum, yep, one of them. And then it goes into your brain processes it, and then all of a sudden, then it causes a reaction. Right? I am speaking to each and every one of you guys. You guys are hearing it. Your brain is processing it. And earlier Michael chuckled quite a bit. Thank you so much for being a very engaged, listener. I love it. And even with my little joke right here, all of you guys start laughing along, right? Why? These are just waves. These are just silly sound waves that's traveling through air. But for some reason, it has an impact. Okay? 80s is the era of power ballads. Love songs from the 80s. Oh my gosh. Okay, sorry. As you know, I grew up in the 80s. 90s did a pretty good job, I think, this day and age is kind of, I don't know, it's a little bit mixed here and stuff like that. But sometimes you hear a song. Maybe it's a worship song. And all of a sudden, something just stirs within you. You're like, oh my gosh, okay? There's this one song by Amy Grant. Some of you guys might go, huh, who? Okay, it's Sing Your Praise to the Lord, okay? And it goes, sing your praise to the Lord. Come on, everybody. Da, 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 da. And it's like, I don't know why. That song was my jam for a while. I was on the freeway, okay? And this is when speed limit was 55, okay? Next thing I looked, I was driving almost 80. Okay. Thank God I was listening to a praise song and probably Holy Spirit, angels were covering my car so the police didn't see me. But for some reason, all of a sudden, that song just made me like left feet on the gas pedal. I was just so happy, And then you guys have those certain songs. You hear it. You're like, oh, I remember that song. Jenny, she dumped me, but that was our song. And for some reason, just sounds. These are just sounds. Music notes created in a certain scale. Sometimes you hear just a couple of notes of that song. And I was like, oh yeah, that's my jam, that's my jam. We don't know why. Psychoacoustic. Power to influence. Yesterday I was coming back from Costco. Something very, very interesting happened. I'm driving, and I look over to, right there next to me. I start seeing this guy. I'm going to put my glasses down so I don't break it. And I'm like, dude, like, is he okay? And then I realized,
The bass just dropped.
no bass sound. I realized he is singing some song. But looking at his face, I'm like, do I need to cast something out here? Do I need to buy something spiritually? But then I realized, no, he's just singing some song. I slow down a little bit, let him, go ahead of me. But that song, by my perception, created so much rage within him. His face was like contorted, like, I am so upset. And I'm thinking, why are you listening and singing to a song like that? But for some reason, he enjoys it and he chooses for it to be influenced that way. Okay? Now let's take it to a more simpler, primal level. Okay. Finger nails on a chalkboard. Okay? Some of you guys don't know what a chalkboard is. You guys want me to? Okay? Certain sounds all of a sudden creates like a fight or flight reaction.
Yeah.
All of these things, once again, want to remind you, they are just sound waves, but somehow they create a certain type of feeling. And earlier we talked about the whole entire sonic canon, right? So all of these things could cause not only a psychological effect, but also a physical effect on you. A lot of strong powers in sound. Okay, now let's look at some of the biblical process, because you're like, Reagan, this is all cool, but can we go to the Bible? Okay, in the Bible we see some of the positive impact of this. Healing words, healing music. And the next slide, we have Psalms 107, 19 to 20. Then they cried to the Lord in their trouble, and he saved them from their distress. He sent out his word and healed them. He rescued them from the grave. In the next one, 1 Samuel 16:23. And so it was whenever the Spirit from God was upon Saul, that David would take a harp and play it with his hand. Then Saul would become refreshed and well, and the distressing spirit would depart from him. Kind of cool, huh? And sometimes we get to that point, we just need some simple instrumental praise music, and we just play it even in the background, and we say, I just need to rest. Power of sound. Okay? Another one, freedom and salvation. Before we go to the next slide, know what these are?
Oh.
All right, you guys are good. Next, Acts 16, 25, 26. Paul and Silas, undaunted, prayed in the middle of the night. Prayed, using your words, speaking. And sang songs of praise to God, while all the other prisoners listened to their worship. Suddenly, a great earthquake shook the foundation of the prison. All at once, every prison door flung open, and the chains of all the prisoners came loose. Power to influence through sound. Physical, psychological, we talk about the soul, and spiritual. Okay? So if you think sound is just, whatever, wow. Let's go on to the next topic. Now we're going to get to some fun part. Resonance and synchronization. Okay, the answers are over here. But I was going to say, does anybody know what resonance is? Resonance is a phenomenon of increased amplitude. Woohoo! I have no idea what that means. Okay, and I just want to be plain and honest with you. I take some of these technical definition, because it may appeal to some of you guys. A lot of times, for me in healthcare, when I hear healthcare stuff, I want to hear healthcare stuff. I don't want to hear stuff that gets so watered down that I end up not being able to hear what the Lord wants people to hear through this. So, for our engineers here, as I say some of this stuff, and I just pray and bless that you guys will all of a sudden get much greater revelation than any of us, because you understand the math behind it. You understand the physics behind it so much more than I do. And then all of a sudden you're like, ding, this light bulb just pops on, and you're like, wow, that ring, you just don't really understand how magnificent that really is. Okay? But resonance happens, okay, when a very similar frequency is applied to one that naturally occurs. And you're like, what naturally occurs? Did you know this cup has a frequency? This is this cup's frequency. Now, I could go very loud, and it could actually crack this because our resonance becomes so great. But as I sing with the same frequency, this cup has no choice but to respond to its calling.
Wow.
Let me say that again. This cup has no choice but to respond to its calling. It's going to start shaking, technical term vibrating, because I am speaking to it in its frequency. To the point that because this thing is solid, it's going to shake and vibrate so much if I hit over 100 decibels that this, well, maybe it's not this glass because this is thicker, but a typical wine glass will go ahead and shatter. Now, let's remember the Bible verse. Hosanna, Hosanna, Hosanna. Tell these people to be quiet. Don't you know that's blasphemous? If I tell them to be quiet, the stones will cry out. How does the stones cry out? Have you ever heard a stone cry? Not really, right? Well, sometimes, I'm going to appeal to the physicist part. Sometimes with the heat hitting on it, so there's going to be gas escaping from it, crack, it makes a sound. But the praise was so needed at that time as Jesus entered into Jerusalem that the frequency is there, that mankind had to speak it out. And if it isn't, then this is Reagan's speculation, but in context of what we're talking about, it's to a certain point that if we do not sing out the praise, that vibration is going to be so loud that the rocks are going to cry out to worship God. Okay? Now, take it with a grain of salt. I'm not a biblical scholar, but as I'm preaching about this, the Lord just dropped that in my heart about the stones crying out. Everything has its frequency. If we're able to tap into it and speak to that frequency, it resonates. So what are we saying? What sounds are we letting hit us? Think about that. Now, synchronization is the operation or activity when two or more things at the same time, with activity of two or more things at the same time or rate. Okay? All right? So, same time, same rate. Okay? Same time, and I can't do this because I'm not a music major. Okay, this one is going like this at 60. This one over here is going at 120. They still hit at one time at the same time, right? But they're not at the same rate. Okay, I'm sorry, same time. I get these two mixed up. And this is kind of how your heart is as well. Your heart could be beating very, 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 very regularly. Okay, it could be beating very irregularly. And then we have this phrase called irregular heartbeat. Okay, and I'm like, eh? Yeah, it's because it may, when you're measuring it may be picking up that you're going at 60 beats per minute, right? But in between where it picks it up, it can have all of this kind of static. Okay, so it's beating regularly 60, but in the middle it's beating like this, and it's 60, 60, 60. Okay, in the same sense, synchronization. All of a sudden, everything beats at the same time. Okay, so we're going to look at a couple of videos that's going to be very, very interesting. The first one is going to be on resonance. Okay, it's going to, once again, we're going to geek out a little bit, so we're going to see an example and then somebody trying to explain it to us. So let's look at the first video. This one we can turn it
The
up.
second law of thermodynamics tells us that everything in the universe tends towards disorder, and in complex systems, chaos is the norm. So you naturally expect the universe to be messy. And yet, we can observe occasions of spontaneous order, the synchronization of metronomes, the perfectly timed orbits of moons, the simultaneous flashes of fireflies, and even the regular beating of your heart. What puts these things in order in spite of nature's tendency for disorder? This video was sponsored by KiwiCo.
Blah, 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 blah. Let's keep going, yeah. This message is not sponsored by KiwiCo.
The second law of thermodynamics tells us that everything in the universe tends towards disorder.
Can I not?
And in complex systems, chaos
You
is
should
the
be able
norm.
to.
So you naturally expect the universe to be messy.
You might need
Okay, just
Mhm.
play it out.
right here.
Yet we can
That's okay.
observe
It's not.
That's okay. It's only like,
order.
we'll repeat this
The
later.
synchronization
But it's important.
Sorry.
He
I'm
says
sorry.
science. You guys all know chaos theory, right? It says everything's supposed to be going toward disorder, but somehow there is regularity.
What puts
Okay.
these things in order in spite of nature's tendency?
And that's a science model of trying to go ahead and explain
This
how
video
things
was
goes
sponsored
into
by
order.
KiwiCo.
Okay.
More about them at the end of the video.
And we'll keep going with this.
On June 10th, 2000, the Millennium Bridge, a new footbridge across the River Thames in London, was opened to much excitement. But as crowds filled the bridge, it began to wobble back and forth. Police started restricting access to the bridge, but that only resulted in long lines to get on. The wobble was unaffected.
You guys
2
see it
days later,
shaking?
the
Yeah.
bridge, which had cost £18 million, was fully closed, and it wouldn't reopen for another 2 years.
Did the
So
people not
what
feel
went
it?
wrong?
Oh, they feel it.
I'd be trying to get
Well,
off.
it's
Why they still
long
walking
been
up?
known that armies should break steps
Okay.
when crossing
Let's go ahead and
bridges.
pause that.
This dates back to an accident.
Okay, so beautiful bridge. First of all, when I see a bridge like that, I'm scared. Okay, because it actually talks about this next incident over here. Because we're always talking about waves. Okay, sound waves. Okay, sound waves. Because they're waves, we talked about it actually has a physical contact, right? And we're going to use principles of physical waves, okay, to explain some of the stuff that we're talking about. Now, it talks about back in England, there's a bunch of troops that went ahead and they were marching. And as you guys know, if you're in the military, you gotta march the stink, right? So whoever's behind me, they gotta go make sure they go ahead and march the stink too. And what happened is about less than 100 soldiers walk across this one bridge. By the time they get halfway through the bridge collapsed. And I'm pretty sure this is God, but science will take credit for it. They figured out is that the synchronization of the marches of all of these soldiers caused a resonance. Okay, causes this resonance of this vibration to the point that it amplified to such great power it caused the bridge to collapse. Okay, and then they said that fortunately, a whole bunch of people fell in there. Only 20 people got injured. Nobody died. But then all of a sudden, when they started researching, figuring out why that's the case, they said it was because of their in sync marching. So then, after that, when they discovered it, every time they go through a bridge, okay, they are ordered to break synchronization. Okay, everybody starts, just walking normal. Okay, and then once they go finally across, somebody will give the command again, and then all of a sudden they all know, and then they start marching back in sync again. Okay, neat, huh? The power of everybody in sync together. All right, so now let's go ahead and look at the video and trying to figure out exactly why was this the next one. Yeah. What was wrong with this bridge here?
Remember the wobbly Millennium Bridge?
It was all apparently down to something called crowd synchrony.
Was it the people walking in step that caused it to oscillate? Actually, kind of the opposite. The Millennium Bridge was designed to look like a ribbon of light, so its construction is unique. Unlike a typical suspension bridge, its supporting cables run alongside it, stretched taut like guitar strings.
In the civil engineering literature, all designers know that you do not build a footbridge with a resonant frequency equal to the frequency of human walking. So we take about 2 strides per second, one with your left foot, one with your right foot. So everybody who takes civil engineering knows if people are going to walk on the bridge, it better not have a resonant frequency in the vertical direction.
I'm like, this is Rachel's
Everybody
specialty.
knows that, including the people who built the Millennium Bridge. But what they didn't know, and what was new that day, is that half the frequency is also important. The frequency of 1 cycle a second, which is the frequency with which you put down, say, your left foot. Half the time you're doing your left foot. So why does that matter? Because when you're walking across a bridge and you put your left foot down, you put a tiny force sideways on the bridge. And normally that wouldn't matter because people are all walking at their own pace, they're not synchronized. So their sideways forces, which are only about 1/10 as big as their downward forces that they impart on the bridge,
You guys
that
don't
would
do
be
that.
negligible and it wouldn't do anything to the bridge. But if the bridge happens to have a sideways frequency of 1 cycle a second, which the Millennium Bridge, it happened, did, then people can actually start to get the bridge moving a little bit.
After the bridge was closed, engineers got their colleagues to walk across it in increasing numbers while they measured its acceleration. With 50 people on the bridge, there was very little motion. At 100, the vibrations had barely increased. At 156, there was still no wobble. But with just 10 more people, 166, the acceleration grew dramatically. The bridge swayed just like it had on opening day. The system had undergone a phase transition.
If people can get the bridge moving a little, it turns out people don't like to walk on a platform that's moving a little bit sideways. If you've ever been in a train that's kind of going fast, or you stand up in a rowboat and it starts moving sideways, people spread their legs apart to try to stabilize themselves, and they will actually start to walk in step with the sideways motion of the bridge. You can see footage from the BBC of people doing that. It's spectacular and crazy.
So it wasn't people walking in sync that got the bridge to wobble, it was the wobbling bridge that got people to walk in sync.
And so as the people got in step with the motion of the bridge, by adopting this weird kind of penguin gait, they ended up inadvertently pumping more energy into the bridge and making its motion worse. And so this was this positive feedback loop between the motion of the crowd causing the bridge to move more, which caused more people to get in step with the bridge, which made more people, drive the bridge.
Once the problem was identified, they could solve it by decreasing the coupling strength. They installed energy dissipating dampers all along the bridge.
It was a tremendous embarrassment.
Tremendous embarrassment. We won't talk about how tremendous. It actually took another £1 million for them to go ahead and fix that mistake. Pretty interesting, huh? What is influencing what, and who is influencing who? And I know that throughout probably one of your science or history classes, you also learned about different bridges where all of a sudden spontaneously these drawstring bridges just break. Okay, and it has to do with this exact same concept, except it's coming from wind. Okay, Mary and I, we had an opportunity to go to Bethel a couple years ago, and right next to in Reading, there's, what's that bridge called?
Sundial.
The Sundial Bridge, okay, and it's a very, very beautiful bridge. It has this arch that goes up. It has these steel cables that go by it, and then one part on the bottom, it has this little cutout so you can actually see all of the support beams and everything like that. And once again, I'm a geek, okay, I'm a nerd, and then I'm like, this is so cool. And then in my head, I'm remembering it's like those stories of how bridges, like this actually could just go ahead and by the pure vibration of it's just going to keep resonating, it's just going to keep resonating, and it starts building and building and building, and eventually this thing is going to vibrate so much that the bridge is going to clap. So I'm like wondering, why doesn't it, right? Well, there's a little plaque that actually talks about that, okay, and how it prevents that, and I don't remember all the science. But what was very neat is right there's a steel cable about this thick, okay, and you want steel thick cable about this thick that supports it. And I went ahead and I put my ear on it, and you hear the vibration going through. I'm like, whoa, why is it doing this, right? And then as we start talking about all of this, as people are walking through, as nature is interacting with it, it's causing a frequency to happen. And I'm just listening to that and say, I don't understand anything about this, and I can't go beyond what my brain is able to process at that time. But I know what was happening there was amazing. And somehow, in the midst of the amazingness, is that there's still order. That God has allowed mankind to figure out so that we're able to create these things and that we end up falling. Okay? So, in the Bible, one of the coolest examples of synchronization is the synchronization of the Israelites. Next one.
Remember the
Okay. Synchronization of the Israelites. You guys remember this synchronization? Then the Lord said to Joshua, see, I have delivered Jericho into your hand, along with its kings and its fighting men. March around the city once with all the armed men. Do this for 6 days. Have 7 priests carry the trumpets of horn in front of the ark. On the 7th day, march around the city 7 times with the priest blowing a trumpet. When you hear them sound a long blast on the trumpet, have the whole army give a loud shout. Then the wall of the city will collapse, and the army will go up, everyone straight in. Okay? Now, there's some really, really cool Christian scientists. Okay? That kind of sounds like, the Scientology stuff, but we're not talking about the Scientology people. But the scientists who are devout Christians. And when they heard this, their mathematical brain starts going. And they said, that's possible. That is possible. As these people are walking in synchrony. Sorry. See? She's a sad woman at heart. Okay. So as these people are walking in sync, and remember, we're not talking about like 100, 1,000 Israelites. We're talking about 100,000 Israelites marching that wall. First day, maybe they didn't get the synchronization part down. Second day, third day, maybe by the 6th day, they all said, we got this. We're marching together in sync. And at the very end, they go ahead and they march around it 7 times. And at that point, the resonance is going. The structure of the walls are so weak, to the point that by the mere blowing of the trumpet sound, that becomes a sonic boom. And the whole entire wall collapsed. Is it true? We don't know. Maybe it just purely God says, all right, my linebacker angels just go in there and knock the wall down. We don't know which one it is. But these scientists have such a tickle in trying to see, is that actually, naturally capable of being done? Well, you saw what almost happened to that bridge if they kept going. It would have snapped. Irregardless of how much steel went into building that. And in the same way, these are stone walls. And they found a frequency with their march. And with that blasting, bam. Pretty cool, huh? All right. Another example is synchronization. I don't know if you guys seen this one. If you guys have, re-enjoy it. If you haven't, be prepared for this. And I'm sorry for musicians that got traumatized by metronomes. You see how everything is just going on its own? automatic one, right? Look at that perfect synchronization. Okay, but we're going to keep going a little bit because I want you guys to see something. I don't know, as I'm watching this, I'm like wanting to move, you know.
Are you synchronizing?
Okay, and watch this. I'm gonna take it off. And I'm gonna take my wand away. All of a sudden. Alright. And
Coke cans have to be.
so I'm not gonna show the video on why this happens, okay? But Coke cans are the secret. As they are there, grounded and whatever, each metronome is grounded. They each have their own frequency. Okay? Their dials are dialed exactly the same place, so they should be oscillating back and forth at the same. But each metronome says, I want to go here, while another one says, I want to go here, another one says, well, I'm right over here. Okay? But once you go ahead and you put it on the two cans, you can see it starts rolling back and forth. As it goes back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, we're not sure which one is the leader, but all of a sudden, whoever is out of sync gets pulled a little bit, gets pulled a little bit, gets pulled a little bit, to the point that everybody goes in sync. But once you go ahead and take that off the can, and you put it back down, and everybody starts going whatever direction they want. Okay? Think about that. Each and every one of you, you are going to oscillate your own beat. You know, you guys we might all say we're here, we're all at 120. Okay. But yet, while we're at 120, we're all over the place. Our feet is grounded in this world. We're speaking the same language. We're singing the same songs. We're reading the same Bible. We're all one heart, but yet we're grounded to this earth. We choose to allow ourselves to be elevated. Be a little wobbly, right? Because you saw that it went back and forth, wobbly, wobbly, wobbly. And then all of a sudden, something special happens. I was going to say magical, but I think it's not, you know. Synchronization starts happening. And people start getting pulled. And we all understand the direction we're supposed to go. But when we choose to go ahead and be taken off the Coke cans and be planted again, we go back to the desires of our heart, the pleasures of this world, whatever thing that pulls at us. We're still 120, I'm still a Christian, you know, but yet there's something that's not quite in sync. So as we wrap up today, there's a couple of things I want to, remind you about sound. There's huge, huge, huge power in sound. Okay. Back in the days when growing up, when Mary was pregnant with Sarah, we read a lot about baby Einstein. Play Mozart for your babies. Okay. And then another thing we had this, this book. It's about, blessing your pregnancy, blessing the baby. And every day we're over here, we're speaking blessings, Every night before, Sarah's even born, we already said the Barak blessing over Sarah, Well, back then we actually sang it. There was a song, that Michael Card wrote, and we sang it every night, okay? And some people say, well, that's kind of stupid, baby, it's just a baby, right? Do you remember when Mary went to visit Elizabeth? And as soon as John the Baptist, infant John the Baptist still in the womb, heard the voice of Mary, leapt. Okay. Any moms that gave birth to a child, you already don't want your kid to be kicking, it's like towards the end they're like kicking over there and it gets so uncomfortable. A friend of mine actually had a bruise internally because the kid was kicking too much. It's her own fault. The doctor told her to lay off the caffeine, but she says she can't, so But but the thing is that baby is fully engaged with the environment. It can't see because its whole entire eyes is closed. It can't smell anything. It can't taste anything. Everything that they need is going through right here. But yet, God created so the kid could hear. The kid could sense. What they hear and what they sense, all of these waves coming at them. Okay? Power of sound. Now, we know that it impacts such a young baby where their brains are not even developed to the point that, they could make decisions. How much are we allowing sound to influence and impact us? Okay? And it gets to a certain level. It's like, you guys may have heard a phrase called brain synchronization. Okay? Some people feel there's a study of science. A lot of it has to do with psychology and psychiatry, where there's imbalances that happens, and because of the imbalance, your neurotransmitters are being actually released incorrectly. So they're actually looking at how the sound actually help your brain to get back in sync, so that it doesn't overfire, it doesn't over-release. Okay. And we're still in very early stages of that, and it sounds very like New Age stuff, but a lot of times science gets a glimpse of what God's original intention, and then as they continue to move forward with it, some of it becomes more and more revealed. Okay? And then another part is kind of just really very, very simple. How many of you guys have watched old Kung Fu movies? Okay? And we always laugh because it's like, hi, my name's. It's like the mouth is still moving, but then there's no more sound. Okay. And my favorite example, modern days, I think, because some of the kids nowadays never watched those old Kung Fu movies that's dubbed over, right? Is that you have a headphone and you're watching something, and you have a very old cheapy, Bluetooth headphone, and next thing you know, it's like, dang it, the sound is like half a second off. Okay. Or any of you guys that stream videos, sometimes the streaming will happen and you're like, dang it, it's like, it's off, and it just bugs you. It's like, you gotta just find a way to hit like a restart to get it back in sync again, right? And we understand that syncing is so important, okay? And what are we syncing to? If this glass right here has a frequency of response to. How much more valuable are you than this glass? How much more valuable are you compared to all the flowers in the field? What is God speaking to you that's causing you to resonate? What are we putting in there that's causing asynchronization? Because if God wants us to resonate like this together, and then we go ahead and we keep putting stuff here that we end up making us not resonate together. And we wonder, what's going on? And I think it totally goes in line with what Judy said today in our message. As we start resonating with God, those fruit will bear. And if we're choosing not to resonate, other stuff will happen. So, power of sound. It's a lot more than we give credit for. But it's so powerful. I'm not going to get into some controversial topics today. Some of it is specific kind of music. Some people say, oh, this kind of music is satanic. It's controversial because, some people say those kind of music ends up creeping into, Christian mainstream. Then should we listen to that? Should we listen to that? I'm not going to go into a lot of those details, but those sounds that are coming in you, what is it causing your spirit and your soul to do? Is it causing you to be in sync, or is it causing you to be asynchronous? So I want you guys to kind of think about that, for today's message. And but at the end of the day, in the midst of all of this, it's not about striving and saying, I need to clear this out of my life, I need to do this. If the Spirit is saying that, awesome, But the joy and the fun of knowing that, hey, I could be resonating with God, and my sound is going to amplify to a point that there's going to be power to shatter glass, power to break the walls of Jericho. That is what we want. That is what we want, and to be able to use our sound, especially the words that are coming out of our mouth, the words that is coming into your ears. Those are the sounds that's most important, and that we got to be careful about that. And sometimes there's just like this distraction over here, it's messing with some of us right now. It's like really bugging us. And some of you guys, shame on you. Doesn't it bother you? But sometimes we do let certain static hum in our life for a little bit too long that we don't realize that it's not good. It's actually making us sick. And all we do is we say, let's turn it down a little bit so we could tolerate it. Is it still there? Yeah. And it's going to bug me later on after church today. Try to figure out how we could fix that again. But, let us be careful with the sounds that we surround ourselves with, because there's true power and there's true influence over them. And what's beautiful is we know that we have a purpose and where we need to go, and how much fun it is to be able to, there's glass. It's like after I did that, I'm like, I want to do it, But knowing that you could do it, that's our fun of our spiritual journey. Knowing that we can. All right.